So starting right along with this week's parasha, Vayeishev Yaakov. Yaakov settled Be'eretz Megurei Aviv, the land of his father's sojournings, Be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan. And I'd like to start by just citing the 11 midrashim, 11 different midrashim, just on the first two words, Vayeishev Yaakov. What is there to say about the first two words? 11 different midrashim on just the first two words, Yaakov settled. I mean, some of my favorite commentary, one of my favorite Rashis, is Rashi pulled up one of these midrashim, which we'll get to. But first, I want to say, I counted here actually, did I say 11? It's actually more than that, more than 11 midrashim, just on these first two words, Vayeishev Yaakov. So it seems like an innocuous statement, and Yaakov settled down in the land of Canaan, the land, Be'eretz Megurei Aviv, the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. So let's see what the Midrash pulls from it. The Midrash is telling us, even though these words seem to be like, you might have thought, God forbid, that these words are fillers. They're just, like moving the narrative along. No. These words are telling us tremendous stories, tremendous stories. So let's start with in Torah Shlema. We're going to go through it in Torah Shlema, especially like this book. This whole set was donated to us by Temple Sinai, and in their library they said their congregants weren't using it, so they donated it to our yeshiva. So Vayeishev Yaakov, first midrash number 1. Amar Rebbe Elazar. Rebbe Elazar taught, Ma Vayeishev Yaakov. What does it mean Yaakov settled down? This teaches us Shachishev Yaakov B'daito V'amar, that Jacob had a thought in his mind, and he said, Var Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Avram Lios Banav Gerim. God already told Abraham that his children will be sojourners. Well, guess what? Or like refugees. Hare ani hayiti ger esrim shana bebeit Lavan mishubad bitzono. I had already been a sojourner, a refugee for 20 years in the house of Lavan. I had to live with my father-in-law for 20 years. I was watching the sheep. And so once Yaakov saw, Kevan Shirasha Esav Alach La'ir Acheres Lagur, once he saw that Esav went to a different city to live, so Yaakov said, so now we fulfilled through my sojournings, presumably through Esav's, we fulfilled this refugee status that had been decreed upon Abraham's descendants for 400 years. Vinis Yashva Daito. So what does Vayeishev Yaakov means? It means Jacob basically was, what's the proper word in English? He let his guard down. He thought, okay, on the coast is clear. He had Yishuv Adas. He had comfort. He wasn't stressed about the servitude that was going to come upon Abraham's descendants. He said, we already fulfilled it. We passed that struggle. So Vayeishev Yaakov, Jacob thought he beat it. He thought he beat the bad times. He thought the bad times were over. God says, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. God says, no way. Machshavasi amuka mimachshavatcha. My thoughts are much deeper than yours. As it says, Kilo machshavosai machshavosechem. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Miyad hevi alav alila yodei Yosef. He brought a whole, alila is like a libel, a pretext, a terrible incident through Joseph. Amos hevi alav alila be'eshin is yayish meshibu b'Tzrayim v'nisyashva da'ito, shenemar Vayeishev Yaakov. Midrash is a little depressing, a little sad. He said, the Midrash says, when do we get troubles? When we think we have it all under control. That's the answer. We think we have everything settled. We think we have it all settled, all worked out. Jacob's like, I got it all worked out. I passed through the hard times. I'm ready to coast a little in life. And who could have blamed him? He'd done his time. He wanted to have Yishuv Hadath. He thought he was overconfident, and he thought he passed through the problems in life. He thought he had passed it. God says, no, 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 no. And that's Midrash gives us a warning. When do we have these problems in life? When we think we've passed the hard times. So never let our guard down. In this Midrash, Rabbi Kasher cites, normally he tells us where the Midrash is from. What's a Midrash Rabbah, Bereshit Rabbah, Birkat Rabbi Eliezer, the Talmud. Here he writes Miktav Yad. He found it in a manuscript. Doesn't tell us who the author is, just found it in manuscript. But he included it because it rings true. It rings true. Okay, that was the first Midrash that Rabbi Kasher cited. Second Midrash, Vayeishev Yaakov. Bo'rei. Okay, come and see. Shekol Yamim Sherishaim Ba'olam. As long as the wicked ones are in the world, Einat Tzadikim near in. The righteous ones cannot be seen. So too you also find Shekol Yamim Shahaya Esav. That all the days that Esav was in the land of Israel, Yaakov Yacholi wrote. As long as Esav was ruling over Israel, Jacob was unable to be seen there. Only once Esav passed, as it says, Vayikach es Esav es nashav, miyad Vayeishev Yaakov. Therefore, only when he sends away the enemy, at that moment will Israel dwell securely. So with this Midrash, and the source for this Midrash comes from the Tanhuma, an ancient source. Also appears in Yalkut Shimoni, slightly different text. So the Midrash's point is Yaakov was able to settle down only because Esav was thrown out, only because Esav left. As long as the wicked ones are there, the tzaddikim can't be there. But once the wicked one leaves, then the tzaddik can come in and fill his space. Hold on one second. So therefore, that's what's going on here. Vayeishev Yaakov, once Esav left, the tzaddikim are able to fill their space. So I guess the message for us is, if you want the tzaddikim to be able to come into a place, first have to get rid of the wicked people. Then we come up to Midrash number 3. Midrash number 3 comes from the Bereshit Rabbah. So the Midrash points out that what is the passage immediately prior to this? At the end of the previous parsha, Vayishlach, it lists the 31 kings of Esav, the 31 kings of Canaan that were living in the area. So what's the relationship? That's what the Midrash says. It says that above it, and these are the kings. And then it says over here, Vayeishev Yaakov. So what's the connection? Amar Rabbi Chanina, so Rabbi Chunya said to one of the people who was walking along on the journey, V'ra kat kalavim v'nisyara mehem, Vayeishev lo b'neihem. Meaning to say, he saw a group of dogs, and was afraid of them, and so he put him amongst them. Also, since Yaakov saw Esav and all the generals, and he was afraid from them, Vayeishev lo b'neihem, or Vayeishev. There's a different version of this midrash. I'll read the other version. It appears in the commentary of the Baalei Tosfos on the Torah. It says as follows: when Yaakov saw these generals for Esav, that there were so many of them, and they were running after them, he was very afraid from them. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, what you need to do is just stay where you are and don't run away, because they won't damage you. Meaning to say, sit down and do the will of God. And that's why it says Vayeishev. Meaning to say, it's like a person's going on the road and he sees dogs running after him to bite him. What does he do? He sits amongst them. That's what Jacob did. Once he saw all these generals of Esav, he didn't know what to do. So he sat and he dwelt amongst them. So basically, what this word Vayeishev, it means here, unbelievable, beautiful explanation. Vayeishev Yaakov is like, when you see these dogs that are nipping at your feet, what's the most important thing to do? Just to be calm. Don't show your fear. Just be calm and calmly sit amongst them. And that'll show like you belong. So Jacob saw all these generals of Esav. He was afraid. What did he do? He sat and lived amongst them. And that's how he was able to overcome them. He just sat. He sat and showed no fear, and he lived amongst them. And that's the idea of it. Just said the generals of Esav. Now Vayeishev Yaakov. Jacob lived amongst them without fear. That's how he was able to defeat them. So there's another version of this midrash. It says Rabbi Barachia that there was a person who got bit by a dog, and he was standing before him. And he said to him, when he saw the dogs, he says, who could stand in front of all these dogs? So what did he do? He sat before them. And he basically calmed them down. Also, Jacob, when Lavan himself came and stood with him, the angel saved him from Lavan. So came Esav. So since he saw all these people, he said, who could stand before all these generals? What did he do? He sat amongst them, and they didn't damage him. Basically, that's the whole idea, that Jacob conquered his fear of them by just staying amongst them. So far we've seen three explanations of the word Vayeishev Yaakov, Jacob settled. The first explanation is that he thought he had passed all the problems. He let his guard down. He had Yishuv Adas. He thought he had passed it, but he didn't. He thought he had passed the troubles, but he was so wrong. The second explanation is only once Esav left was Yaakov able to settle there. Once the Rishayim, once the wicked ones leave, can the tzaddikim come and settle? And now this third approach was he was afraid of them. And what do you do when you're in fear? You go right to the source and you settle there. And that's how he was able to defeat them. The fourth approach comes from the Midrash Lekach Tov. It says, Vayeishev Yaakov, Rishaim Eretz Yisrael Mekiasan. The wicked ones, the land of Israel, will spit them out, throws them up. The land of Israel cannot tolerate wicked people. Tzaddikim, but the righteous ones, Eretz Yisrael Kolatatan, the land of Israel absorbs them. By Esav, it says, Vayelach al Eretz Mimnei Yaakov Aviv. Achiv. Esav had to run away from the land. But the Tzaddikim, the land of Israel draws them in, because it says, Vayeishev Yaakov, Eretz Migrei Aviv, that Jacob settled in the land of his father. So this is a fourth approach, that this is the contrast between Esav and Jacob, that Esav had to be thrown out of the land because he was wicked, whereas the land was able to absorb Jacob because he was righteous. Okay, now we come to the fifth approach. What is the fifth approach? It says that the fifth approach is word Vayeishev Yaakov means its expression of, ironically, securely, betach, meaning to say he had security finally in the land. He was able to dwell with security. And that's what he finally had in this land. And he was naive in dwelling securely because he didn't realize, it's a little bit like the first approach. So he didn't realize that usually when you dwell securely, pretty soon you're going to have pain. But that's what he did. He dwelt securely. Sixth approach comes from the Gemara that we're starting to study now in our Daf Yomi. Today we did a Siyum, or we finished Basra. Actually, we're going to do the Siyum a week from today at 3:30 p.m. at the home of the Furchgots, Harold and Diana. We're going to have a Hanukkah Masiba. We're going to have some dancing, light the Hanukkah candles. If anybody wants to get more information and to join us, it's at 3:30 p.m. when we'll do a Siyum at the Furchgots house. Anyway, it says, Vayeishev Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Whenever it says the word Vayeishev, it's an expression of pain. As it states later on at the end of Parashas Boach, Vayeishev Yisrael b'Shittim, Vayachela Amoznos. The Jewish people settled in Shittim and they began to commit a sinful act. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz migarei aviv be'eretz Canaan, vayavei Yosef estiba samra al avim. So the Gemara is saying a sixth approach is saying that the word Vayeishev is a word in the Torah which portends disaster. It's a harbinger of disaster that's expected to come. And so that's what we, the reader, are being clued into the fact that we, the reader, are being clued into the fact that Jacob is about to have a big downturn in his life, that there's about to be a lot of pain and suffering. That's what the word Vayeishev introduces. Okay, so far we've seen 6 approaches. I'll summarize them all at the end, so in case somebody forgets. But the 7th approach is incredibly powerful. Now, these are the days where we have to be Zionists. We have to support the land of Israel. 7th approach is a very Zionist approach. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz migarei aviv, and Jacob settled in the land of his father's sojournings. Says the Midrash Hagadol, Mikan amru yeshivas chutz haaretz eina nikreis yeshiva, el yeshivas eretz Yisrael. If he had settled outside, when he lived outside the land of Israel, that's not called Vayeishev. It's only called Vayeishev when he lives in the land of Israel. The word Vayeishev means to live. When he lived outside of Israel, that's not called living. The real settlement is in the land of Israel. Means to say all those years that he was living outside the land of Israel was not considered yeshiva. It was not considered living. It was only once he came to the land of Israel, then he settled down, that's what's going to be called living. So that's the 7th approach. The age of Yaakov, now he's living, because now he's in the land of Israel. Prior to this, he was outside the land of Israel. That's not considered living. And a similar approach in Bereshit Rabbah, Vayeishev Yaakov, Kach Amru Chachamim. This is what the sages said. Lonena Yaakov Avinu Mimoshav. Jacob never benefited from any place that he settled down until he lived in the land of his father's sojourning. And that, what is that? The land of Canaan. Meaning to say both are similar, that finally that Jacob has returned to the land of Canaan, we could call his settling down. But outside the land of Israel, he was unsettled. So his next approach, Vayeishev Yaakov, is cited by Rashi, one of my favorite Rashis. Friend Shimon told it to me many years ago in the name of his father. Vayeishev Yaakov, Yaakov settled. Bikesh Yaakov Vayeishev B'shalva. Jacob says, listen, I've been working hard my whole life. Let me just settle down and take it easy. He wants to settle down. He wants to cash his chips in, sell his company, move to Boca, go golfing 3 times a week, get the early bird special at the local restaurant, and abandon his responsibility to be the patriarch of the tribe and to continue the mission of spreading the word of Hashem. He wanted to settle down in peace. Says the Midrash, Gracious Rabbah, Rabbi Yaakov, Shasha Tzadikim, Mivakshim, Leishev, Vishalva, Ba'olam Hazeh. When the Jewish people want to settle down in tranquility in this world, Hasatan Ba Umikatreg, Satan comes along and prosecutes them and says, well, not enough that they're going to get plenty of reward in the next world. They want to dwell in security in this world as well. Not enough that they want to have the world to come. They also want to have this world. Vayeishev Yaakov. He says it's not enough that Jacob wants to dwell in the world to come in tranquility, but once he also desired to dwell in this world, he had the turmoil of Joseph. The turmoil of Joseph. So this Midrash is telling us Yaakov wanted to settle in peace, but the tzaddikim are never supposed to have the peace. They're always supposed to be working, never supposed to have complacency. Never seek, oh, I just want quiet. That's not the way of the tzaddik. Finally, the last midrash that we'll cite that directly just dedicated to this phrase, Vayeishev Yaakov. But there's actually 2 more after that, but this is the just on Vayeishev Yaakov. Amar Yaakov avosai nesavu eshev eretz Yisrael v'yashuv. This comes from also Rabbi Kasher found this in a manuscript. Jacob said, my fathers desired to live in the land of Israel, and they dwelt there. Avram said, how will I know that I will inherit it? By Yitzchak it says, Gur ba'aretz hazos. And Jacob says, and should I not live there? Immediately gathered up the people of his house and his sons, and he settled in the land. It says, Vayeishev Yaakov eretz migurev. From here we learn whoever lived in the land of Israel, it's as though they are accepting the yoke of heaven. But whoever lives outside the land of Israel, it's like they are worshiping idolatry. Because, meaning to say that Jacob is the emphasis here in this midrash, is that he's continuing the path of his fathers. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz migurev. Outside of Israel, it was filled with idolatry. But here, in the land of Israel, he's saying, in the land of Israel, he's continuing the path of his father. So the question, so let's just summarize these 10 explanations of the word Vayeishev. 10 different explanations we saw of just the word Jacob settled. 10 beautiful, each one of them stands on its own as a brilliant reading of the text. We'll just summarize it. We can have all 10 at our fingertips so we can know. So we can know if anybody says to you this Shabbos, what do the words Vayeishev Yaakov mean? You can give them the 10 explanations of Vayeishev Yaakov. Just to summarize, the first explanation we saw was that Jacob thought he had beaten the curse. He relaxed after his success, after his refugee time. He relaxed and he didn't have his guard up. He thought he was done with the problems, but nope, he relaxed too soon in life. Number two, Vayeishev Yaakov, Jacob lived in the land of Canaan, but he could only live there because Esav had left. Whenever there's a wicked one there, a tzaddik can't settle. It's only when the wicked one leaves that the tzaddik can live there. Number three, it's to say that in the previous chapter it talked about the kings of Canaan and of Esav, and Jacob was afraid of them. So what do you do when there's something that you're afraid of? You settle down amongst them, and that's how you're able to defeat them. Like, and they gave the parable of the dog. And if the dogs are racing after you, you have to exude calm and confidence. Number four, Yaakov was able to settle in the land because he was a tzaddik, but the wicked ones are vomited out of the land because the land cannot absorb. The land of Israel can't hold wicked ones for long. Number five, Vayeishev Yaakov, he dwelt securely. He dwelt securely. Number six, whenever it's that this word is a harbinger for the future, it portends the bad things coming. Word Vayeishev in the Bible refers to something bad that's about to happen. That's why we had the problems with Joseph. It's hinting to that. Number seven, so from here we see that he finally dwelt in the land of his father, but outside of Israel, that was not called settling. When a Jew lives outside of Israel, you shouldn't feel settled, because that's just a temporary home for us, not a permanent home. Number eight, our sages said that Jacob did not enjoy any of his previous dwelling places. It's only when he lived in the land of Canaan did he enjoy the dwelling place. Number nine is that Jacob sought Bikesh Yaakov Vayeishev B'shalva. Jacob said, I've had a hard life. I want to settle down in peace. Let me have a little bit of peace, tranquility. God says, no, you'll have that in the next world. In this world, you're not ready to have peace. And the turmoil of Joseph sprung upon him. And number 10, the emphasis on the land of his fathers, meaning to say that he took up the land that his fathers had lived in. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv. And from here we see, says the Midrash, that anyone who lives in the land of Israel accepts the yoke of heaven because they're continuing on the path of the patriarchs. But if you live outside the land of Israel, like most of us on this call, then it's like a little bit like you're worshiping idolatry. These are the 10 explanations on just the words Vayeishev. So then we have another approach, one more approach. Right? It's not really connected to Vayeishev, but I'll share it anyway. You could be the judge. Hold on one second. Want to just talk a little bit more. We have a few minutes that I'd like to spend talking about the phrase that Jacob gave to Joseph, a ketonet pasim. He gave to Joseph it says, Jacob loved Joseph for more of his children, because he was his ben zikunim, whatever that means, maybe his son of his old age or his smartest son, and he made for him a ketonet pasim. What's the ketonet pasim? Now, many of us have seen the Joseph and the multicolored dream coat, but what does it mean, made from a ketonet pasim? So there, the Midrash has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 explanations. Let's see what it means. So the first one comes from the Bereshit Rabbah. Reish Lakish says, in the name of Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, a person should not treat or favor one of his children. A person should never show favoritism towards one of his children, because through this ketonet pasim that Jacob made for Joseph, they hated him, meaning to say Jacob was responsible for causing the brothers to hate Joseph because he made him this special coat. So right away, the Midrash says that this was the source of the jealousy. And we have to be very careful as parents not to demonstrate favoritism for one of the children. Why was it called pasim? So basically, it's like it reached either till the pas yado, or it was being able to hit in this part of his hand. Others say, what does it mean, pasim? Here's what the Bereshit Rabbah says. It's called ketonet pasim because of the pain that came as a result to Joseph. The pasim stands for Potiphar. The pay is for Potiphar. Samach is the sochrim, the merchants that sold him. Yud is the Yishmaelim, and the Mem is the Midyanim. They all reflect different aspects of the sale of Joseph. So he gets this coat, and he thinks that this coat he's made it in the world. He's reached his heights of success. When really it's just the opposite. The coat is the harbinger of all his problems. Like a big message for us in life. When we think we have success, watch out. That's the moment you have to watch. That's the moment you have to be careful. What we think is our success could really be our undoing. But what we think is our undoing can really be our success. So why was it called Ketonet Pasim? The Midrash says, Ketonet Asa Kadosh Baruch Hu Adam U'Azro He Shalakha Esav Min Nimrod V'Hi Big Day Esav HaChamudot Shalavash Yaakov V'Shasa Bracha. Oh wow, what a beautiful Midrash! The Midrash says, what was this garment that Jacob gave to Joseph? This was the tunic that God made for Adam and Eve. And that's what Esav took from Nimrod. This is the garments of Esav that Jacob dressed himself in during the blessings. He took this garment. This was a special garment. Talk about an heirloom. Went back to Adam and Eve. That's an heirloom. Adam and Eve covered themselves in it. Then Nimrod took it. Then Esav took it. Then Jacob took this garment and used it to conceal himself. And that's what he gave to Joseph. So now we see from here, it wasn't a garment. It was a spiritual, anointing. He says, you are the one to carry it on. And of course, the brothers did not like that aspect of it. Did not like that aspect. Okay, anyway, I think that was a good place to stop. We talked about these two things, the words Vayeishev, Yaakov, and Ketonet Pasim. Very, very beautiful midrashim that we saw today. All right, everybody, if anyone has any questions, happy to address.